Hey everybody, Eric Rennie here, and welcome to the 46th episode of the Writ Podcast, the last episode before Thursday's Ontario election. So to go over the map, go over what's going to happen on election night, I'm joined by Philippe J. Fournier of 338 Canada. Philippe, how you doing?
It's great to speak with you, Eric. Bonjour, how are you?
I'm good. I'm in Toronto, which is different. I haven't traveled for the last 2.5 years, so this is my first excursion outside of the province, so or outside of my home, I should say. But apart from that, it's fun to be in the last days of an election. Though I can't say that this election itself has been all that much fun.
Not very compelling. I mean, it's rare that an election ends roughly the same way that it began when we talk about voting intentions and polling. I think this election, we'll see whether the turnout is up. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, later today, but it hasn't been very compelling. With the return of the spring and the sunny patios, I'm guessing that not many voters in Ontario are that motivated for this election, but let's try to make it fun nevertheless.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll go over the map, and then I think we'll set the stakes for each of the parties. Now, of course, 338 Canada, you have projections. I have the poll tracker that I'm running for this campaign for the CBC, and I think we generally are on the same page. My latest numbers, which were as of Tuesday morning, had about 38% for the PCs, 27% for the Liberals, 23% for the NDP, 7% for the Greens. And that produced 81 seats for the PCs, 22 for the Liberals, 20 for the NDP, and 1 for the Greens. You have something similar, I think.
As of this morning, of course, I will update it tonight and tomorrow night. I had 78 for the PCs, so well within range of your numbers. I had the NDP at 25 and the Liberals at 20. But as you know, the Liberal bracket, the Liberal confidence intervals is extremely wide because there's a lot of uncertainty. The Liberals are actually competitive in far more ridings than the NDP, but they're not necessarily projected to win them. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But also, I have the Greens at 1, perhaps 2. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I see that we have similar numbers. So either we're both roughly correct, or we are both very wrong.
Yeah, there's always a possibility. Yeah, the Liberal numbers are interesting because you're right. I have only a 2-seat gap right now between the two parties, but the high range for the Liberals for me goes up to 34, and for the NDP it only goes up to 27. So there's a bigger gap that way. You can imagine a worse. It's almost like you could guess what the NDP is going to get with a lot more confidence than the Liberals. The Liberals could have a pretty good night; they end up second, maybe near 30 seats, or they have a pretty bad night and they're back in the teens and they're in third place again.
Absolutely agree. And it's very interesting to see. You may have seen on Twitter, I published my curves, votes per seat. So basically the efficiency of each party's vote. And the NDP has a very efficient vote at 20 to 25%. But from 25 to 30%, should it get there, is highly inefficient because they just have their strongholds. Whereas the Liberals, they are competitive in many 905 ridings, but so is the PC. And so a 2-point difference or a 2 or 3 point difference between what the Liberals could get and what they're having in the polls right now is a huge difference. And so, it makes those projections fun, but also, if the Liberals win 35 seats or if they win 18, no scenario in there would surprise me, really.
Yeah. And when you talk about the NDP's vote efficiency, I remember in 2018, there was a time when the NDP was narrowly ahead of the PCs in the polling average. And I think at the time I was still projecting a 30-seat gap between the two, or at least a 20-seat gap with the PCs winning. I remember being very nervous about that because you never want to go into an election night as someone who's forecasting elections with one party leading in the vote and nowhere close to winning the seat. So I don't think we're anywhere close to that, but you're right. The NDP's vote efficiency is probably what's going to save them, ironically, a little bit, because the NDP, has often complained about the difference between the vote share and the seat share for each of the parties. But how about we start going across the province? Why don't we'll go from east to west. So we'll start with Eastern Ontario. I find
just pulled my numbers here because I don't know them by heart. And sorry for people who see my big hand. Unfortunately, my laptop has a camera below the screen, which is so stupid. But hang on, I pulled up the numbers. But Okay,
Well, then
so
if you're just
Eastern
listening to
Ontario.
this on the podcast, then you're getting the advantage here. So you're not seeing the hand that's coming for my face.
Right.
Okay, so Eastern Ontario, the PCs have been holding a lead in the east part of the province for really the whole campaign. But it really masks the fact that the PCs get a lot of support in the rural ridings, and the Liberals and the NDP much more competitive in Ottawa, where a lot of the seats are. What are your expectations for Eastern Ontario?
Well, not many compelling seats. I mean, of course, there's two that I will really watch. I think, of course, Glengarry Prescott Russell. Will Amanda Smart switch parties, as many of you know? Will she win her bet and be elected as the Liberals? I have a feeling that she will, but again, the PC brand is always strong in those rural areas. We'll see if the Francophones, I think this riding is a majority of Francophones. Yeah. We'll see if they will follow her in the Liberal fold. And also in Kingston and the Islands was won by the NDP. I have it a very close race between the NDP and the Liberals, and the PC, do reasonably well, although they shouldn't win it. Those are the two seats that I will watch. But again, Ottawa should be mostly red, except maybe for Ottawa Centre, which is your riding, I think. Yeah. But the rest should be blue. I don't expect many surprises. Maybe Ottawa West Nepean. You saw that Doug Ford was there, I think, the day before yesterday. Perhaps they see an opportunity to keep that seat, but not many compelling seats in this area. What do you think?
Yeah, because Ottawa West Nepean, the PCs won with 32.8%. It was the lowest vote share for a winning party. And you see the polls that the PCs are leading, but they're further back than they were back in 2018. So you almost expect that they're going to come down a little bit. So it doesn't take much for either the NDP or the Liberals, probably the Liberals. The NDP didn't even win this seat back in 1990 when Bob Rae came. So I would expect that the Liberals take that. Ottawa Centre is the one that I'm kind of interested in. Yes, it's where I live, but it is an NDP riding that's held right now by Joel Harden. It used to be Liberal. It just voted Liberal last year in the federal election. But will he be able to hold on? I think he has gotten a little bit of kudos for some of the things he did during the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa and that kind of thing. So he might be able to hold on. Kingston, I think, is going to be tough for the NDP to hold. Their incumbent's not there, and they have a former Liberal MP who's running. And then Glengarry Prescott Russell, which is the riding where I grew up in. I'm expecting that. I would think that Amanda Smart is going to hold it. It was actually kind of surprising that the PCs were able to take it last time. There was that poll from Hazu Canada with the Francophone support. I'm not sure what to make of it that much. It seems a little unlikely to me that the Liberals and the PCs would be tied among Francophones in Ontario, but I guess this will be the case because, as you mentioned, Glengarry Prescott Russell is the only majority Francophone riding outside of Quebec and New Brunswick in the country. So it's sort of the Franco-Ontarian, heartland, I guess you could say. So
that Franco-Ontarian poll was strange, huh? It was the Liberals and the PC neck and neck, but Doug Ford way ahead in preferred premier.
It feels like name recognition.
It was a head scratcher.
Yeah. Because I imagine, if you're a Francophone watching Francophone news in Ontario, you'll see Doug Ford every night. Stephen Del Duca, probably not seeing that often, and he doesn't speak French like any of the leaders. So there's a name recognition problem there. But Glengarry will be a bit of a test case, I think, in terms of, Francophone support. So moving, I said west. I don't know what's next to go west. Let's just go then to Toronto, I suppose. Toronto is a place where I think the Liberals are hoping to make a lot of pickups. The NDP really wants to hold on to the downtown core that they won last time. PCs, have seats in Etobicoke and York and Scarborough. They want to hold on to those. It's a weird, it's one of those cases that's really different, right? Because the federal level, the NDP still hasn't won a seat in Toronto for the last few elections. But in this case, they're probably going to hold on to a lot of those. But what are you expecting in Toronto? What are you focusing on?
Well, here's the thing. I think I tweeted this for a while ago. I took the Ipsos, Léger, English Street Institute. All these polls show that the NDP was in third place in Toronto. And of course, the regional subsamples are smaller, so there's higher uncertainty. But if memory is correct, the NDP did win Toronto in a popular vote. I think they had 37%-ish that area, and now they would be third with around 25%. So that is still a big swing. So they should hold on to their safest seats, but there's no way with those numbers that they would hold on to all the seats. And of course, the liberal brand, as you said, very popular in the 416. So I have the PCs leading near, as you said, in the Scarboroughs and Mississauga is not Toronto, of course. The Liberals should make a few pickups, but there will be some very close races in that. I have a lot of toss-ups in Toronto. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I have 6 toss-ups just in Toronto. So that should be interesting. But if the NDP does not hold on to most of its seats in Toronto, it's going to be very hard to finish second. That's because the NDP should be almost shut out of the 905. We don't expect, maybe a Brampton, but aside from that, so the NDP, if they want to keep official opposition, they have to do well in the 416.
For me, I have the gap between the Liberals is between 5 and 11 seats, right? So in one case, they do quite well, winning almost half the seats in Toronto. The other one is not very good. And a lot of that will depend on what happens to the NDP and the PCs. There's a couple storylines that will be interesting to watch in Toronto itself. The one that I've been kind of keyed in on is the riding in York South-Weston. That's where the NDP won that last time. Michael Ford, who is the nephew of Doug Ford, is running for the PCs there. It's kind of a funny thing with the Ford family dynasty going to be able to continue or not. York South-Weston is right next to Etobicoke North and Etobicoke Center and those ridings that are Ford Nation. So we'll see if that happens. But I think there's going to be, it's almost like a knife fight in some of these Toronto ridings it's the NDP and the Liberals. And it's not going to make a difference for government. Toronto St. Paul's, Toronto Center, those kinds of ridings. But there's going to be a lot of hurt feelings after the election among Liberals and New Democrats based on who's going to come out ahead there.
There's the animosity between those two parties has not gone down during this campaign. That's for sure. I'm just looking at the York South-Weston. I have a 6-point gap between first and third place in my projection. So, I have the PCs projected as leading, but who knows? This, the PC would still have to get their vote out to win that riding because it's going to be a very close race. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's one I want to ask you. I do not have the Greens doing well in Toronto. The polls they don't show anything that indicates that the Greens should improve in Toronto. But I can't tell you how many times on Facebook, on Twitter, even on Reddit, people ask me what they think the Greens' chances in University Rosedale. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I don't think they have much of a chance. Sorry to Green listeners. It's downtown Toronto. Those ridings have never really voted very Green. There was the one by-election where Annemie Paul did well for when she was the new leader. But in the last election, she got, I think, about 7% of the vote.
Yeah.
And her riding is right next to University Rosedale. So, Diane Sachs is the environment commissioner, who used to be the environment commissioner, running for the Greens, getting a lot of attention from Mike Schreiner. But, can she triple? I think she needs to. I think the party had around 5% support there around last time. So to win, you got to jump up to 35?
At least.
That's tough. Maybe she'll finish third, but.
Yeah, you've seen the NDP and the Liberals basically attacking each other a lot for splitting the vote. At some point, I think they will have to look towards the Greens. If the Greens really get 7 or 8% of the vote, these parties will have to talk to each other at some point, because the Greens at 7 with 1 seat, maybe two. That's a big vote splitting right there. And again, among the comments that I have for this podcast, I tweeted, send me your ideas. I'd say half of them talk about proportional representation. That whole story. I'm not against. By the way, I'm not against proportional representation. I'm Switzerland here, but I can see, looking at these numbers, that the vote splitting will really benefit the PC in many places. Yeah,
and maybe for the Greens, it's no one wants to attack him because Mike Schreiner is seems to be having a pretty good campaign, and
Yeah.
no one likes it when you're punching down. So if you have the NDP or the Liberals punching down at the Greens, that's not a terrific look, especially when they want a lot of those Green voters to change their mind right at the last minute and go for the NDP or go for the Liberals, right? So it's a tricky place for them. But, you know, with the PCs though at like 38%, 37, 39, that's majority territory.
It is.
Even if, you know, the NDP or the Liberals were north of 30, right? So
the NDP was at 30, just under 34% in 2018,
yeah.
right? And they won 40 votes. So, you know, with 23%, they will only keep the safest. There's vote splitting. That's one thing, but also you don't have enough votes, 23%. So it's sad state of affairs for them. But you know, I don't think Andrea Horwath had a really compelling campaign. I mean, neither did Duca. Nobody did. So if nobody has a good campaign, well, the incumbent is usually the winner.
Yeah, because I mean, you look at those three campaigns, you can't really say one was much better than the other. So there's no real reason for anything to shift around. Speaking of shifting around, the Greater Toronto area, swing area, goes between the Liberals and the PCs over the last couple of elections, decides who gets to form the government. My numbers have right now, you know, the PC is about a 10 points ahead of the Liberals, but yeah, the NDP down in the teens. And we've seen this in poll after poll, right? It's not just some, you know, rogue poll or anything like that, that the NDP is not really competitive. And in the GTA, that means seats that they won in Brampton, they won 3 of the 5. They'll be lucky, I think, to hold 1. Oshawa is one in the GTA that could be at risk for them. And, you know, while the Liberals might be able to pick up some seats in Mississauga, you know, the area around Oakville, the PCs might be able to make it up by winning a couple of those Bramptons, a couple of those other ones like in Oshawa and places like that.
In Oshawa, well, Oshawa was also a close race, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I feel it was like a 3-point win. And so it's really difficult to see a party going from 33% or 34% provincially to 23% and still keep that seat. I mean, local effects, of course, can have a tremendous effect on the final numbers, but yeah, I have Oshawa leading towards the PC. The Bramptons, they won 3, as you said. I have them competitive in 1, which is Brampton East. I think there was a best score. Aside from this, I see the Liberals perhaps more competitive, as you said, in the Mississaugas. But I mean, those Trudeau Ford voters, because the 905, you saw in the last federal election, most of those seats went red, and some by reasonable margins. So yes, those you have to win the suburbs to win an election. It's true in Quebec, it's true in Ontario, it's true at the federal level, and there's no reason to see many losses for the PC in the 905, according to the numbers that we had. The NDP is down, the Liberals are up a little bit, but not enough to, I think, to crack that foundation of the PC.
Yeah, I think it puts them in competition for a couple of those Mississauga seats, because if you think back to 2018, the NDP vote shot up in Brampton. It shot up in Mississauga, but from such a low base that it didn't really put them into contention. And then in the ridings north of Toronto in the York region, that is pretty friendly PC territory. That's where some of the federal Conservatives are able to win in the GTA, the few areas. So that'll be hard for the Liberals to break into. And you mentioned Brampton East. That's Gurtan Singh, who's the brother of Jagmeet Singh, and that was Jagmeet Singh's old riding. So that is the one place in sort of that Peel region where the NDP has a long history, because Singh won his seat the first time in 2011. So this is before the big wave in, you know, in 2015 federally or 2018. So, but yeah, I think it will be tough for the NDP if they end up going from 3 seats in Brampton to maybe 1. That's going to be disappointing for them.
There's Ajax that I wonder what will happen. I have it, I think you do too, as a close Liberal PC race with, you know, you always give a little nudge to the incumbent, but there's no incumbent. Mr. Phillips left, of course. And there was this Main Street poll published yesterday that gave the Liberals a 10-point lead. It was a small sample. I think it was 350 cases. So it was a small sample, but still that was surprising. So I have it as a toss-up Liberal and PC. If the Liberals lose Ajax, and lose those Mississauga seats, they will finish third in a seat count for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Trudeau Ford voters. I know it sounds like something the press gallery might make up, but there are polls that show.
Oh yeah,
I think it was 20% support among people who voted for the federal Liberals, who say they're going to vote for the PCs this time. So they definitely exist. And you mentioned the riding polls. I haven't paid as much attention to them because I find they pop up and I've been missing them a bit more. If you've been keeping a close eye on them, have they, and I might be putting you on the spot, but have they,
go ahead.
Have they aligned with what we're expecting, or do they suggest something that's different from what we're expecting?
I would say mostly. I mean, of course, the Main Street they had some misses in the past with writing polls, but at the federal level, they were really good. Most of them were really good. We're really close. It's just that, again, do you capture enough with 350 cases in a poll? Perhaps not. So I followed the Main Street writing polls, and I don't remember seeing huge surprises. There was one, though. Yes, there was one in Hamilton. We're going to get there, but Paul Miller's old writing, which is Hamilton Stony Creek, I believe.
Yeah, Hamilton East. Yeah.
It had the NDP in third, and this. I'm not saying the poll is wrong, but this is there was a eyebrow riser, I would say. It surprised me because it's a huge majority that they had in 2018 in Stony Creek. So I would be very surprised if the NDP finishes third. But again, Paul Miller was at 10% running as an independent. And if he does get 10%, it's much harder for the NDP to win that riding. But otherwise, those riding polls were not very surprising. Ajax, I mean, the way that Rod Phillips left caucus, perhaps, it gives a little nudge to the Liberals. But I've been following, and it's been very interesting. No big surprises, I would say, overall.
Well, you mentioned Hamilton East, Stony Creek, so we'll go to the Hamilton Niagara area. There's not that many seats, but I'm curious what's going to happen here, because for a good chunk of the campaign, we were seeing polls in the Hamilton Niagara region. There's a couple of pollsters that do break it down for that specific region, like Leger and Main Street, and suggesting that the NDP was doing pretty good. Now, the last set of Main Street polls I've seen have not had them doing as well. So I'm wondering if it's just a sampling thing. It'll work its way out in the next couple of days, or if the NDP has reason to worry about some of their seats. They, the ones they have around Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, Hamilton. I can imagine very little changing, but I can also imagine that it could be a place for the PCs to pick up, and maybe even the Liberals can sneak one in.
I would check, of course, as we said, Stony Creek, also Hamilton West, Ancaster, and St. Catharines and Niagara Center. All these seats were won by the NDP in 2018, and I would say all of them are in danger. I mean, they could still remain NDP, but the margin is going to be much closer. And Ford has been going after that region. He's been there many times during the campaign, as you saw. And so I thought it was interesting because Ford could have very well played defense all that election and still win. But he did go to those regions many times, and he also went to Windsor. So perhaps he sees blood in the water, he smells blood in the water, and he sees that the NDP is a bit weaker among blue-collar workers. He's had the support of many unions, as you know. So yes, those seats are definitely in play, and the NDP better get a strong get-out-the-vote machine in those regions, otherwise they would lose those seats. Yeah,
I can imagine the PCs targeting the NDP more. Well, I mean, there's very few Liberal seats to pick up, but
that's right.
It does feel like maybe they're seeing more of an opportunity there. One place that's mostly an NDP PC fight would be the Southwest, so everything from Kitchener down to Windsor. This has been another place where the PCs have been leading in the polls for a long time. They have a lot of the rural ridings, so it's not, it's hard to parse it out because the NDP holds the seats in Windsor, in London, in Kitchener, Waterloo. But I think, London's probably going to stick the way it is. Essex and in the Southwest could be one that the PCs could pick up. Yeah. But it seems like most of the fights, most of the interest on election night will be around Kitchener, Waterloo, Absolutely. Cambridge area.
Absolutely. I have Essex going to the PC. It was a close race that the NDP won last time. Considering the swing that we saw provincially and regionally, I have the PC favored in Essex. And aside from that, you're right, we have to go back to Kitchener. But you saw in the Liberal candidate posted her own poll that showed us she was leading in Kitchener. So always be careful, folks, when you see candidates releasing their own polls with no methodology, no polling firms. It's a cheap trick. I hope voters don't fall for it. And I don't say that because she's a liberal. We saw that in the last Quebec election, all these PQ and CAQ voters just releasing their own polls. Please don't do that. Don't do that. You're subverting democracy. You're subverting the polling industry. But yeah. The NDP here should definitely play defense. They have to hold on to those seats. I do not think that they have hopes for a greater seat count in southwestern Ontario. So if they want to remain the official opposition in the last 2 days of this campaign, they really should play defense in Kitchener, London, and Windsor.
Yeah. The interest around Kitchener-Waterloo for me will be these third parties. Because the PPC did pretty well in Kitchener-Waterloo. They got usually 7-8%. And these are always very tight ridings, right? So even if all those votes aren't conservative or PC votes, enough of them are that they could cause some problems. So you have the leader of the New Blues running in Kitchener-Conestoga. You have the only incumbent New Blue MPP, Belinda Karahalios. It's a family affair. She was elected as a PC in Cambridge. Now she's running as a New Blue. I don't think they'll win. I don't think they'll get anywhere close to winning. But if they do get 10% of the vote or anything close to that, then the PCs, who only won these by narrow margins last time, could be in danger. Right. But I don't know who wins them. Is it the NDP? Is it the Liberals? The Liberals have a bit of a history there. The NDP had the better result in 2018, but the polls aren't really giving a lot of clarity about what's going to happen.
This is definitely a region. I think there's like 5 seats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 seats here that are definitely to watch. I have 3 of them as toss-ups and 2 of them leading PC. So again, this will be a matter of machine. I mean, the New Blue Party has been polling between 2 and at most, I think I saw one with 5%. It doesn't tell us much about that region, obviously. But you have to remember also that Maxime Bernier's first election was pretty bad, 1.6 federally. It takes a few cycles to get your organization. And of course, in Ontario, the ridings are large. There's like 100,000 voters per riding. So you need a lot of votes to get there. I'm not sure they get double digits in those ridings. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but it takes time and organization to really get people to know you. Lawn signs are not usually a very good indicator.
There was a poll that was just put out, I think recently by Innovative Research Group. I'm not sure if you saw it, but it was profiling the New Blue voter. And they pretty much were like a PPCer. They were the ones who were most upset about pandemic restrictions and vaccination mandates and that kind of thing. So, we are kind of expecting that. For me, that's the benchmark. The PPC did well in Niagara, Kitchener, Windsor areas. So that's what I'm expecting them to do well in. But we'll see if they match it. I do wonder if they're not getting nearly as much media as Bernier did in the last campaign, right? So I feel like it'll be tough for them to match Max and Bernier's numbers.
We should talk about Parry-Sound Muskoka.
All right, that's place.
The Georgian Bay.
Georgian Bay. That's a good segue into Northern Ontario. Parry-Sound Muskoka is the southernmost. I was speaking to someone from Northern Ontario who said Parry-Sound is very clearly in Northern Ontario. Muskoka is not. So it straddles the line. But anyway, so Parry-Sound Muskoka is treated in Northern Ontario. That is to me the one I'm most curious to see what's going to happen, because the Greens had 20% last time. Matt Richter has run there since 2007. So he's been there again and again and again, and he's done pretty good. The Greens do well in Georgian Bay for some reason, like that Bruce Peninsula all the way up to Parry-Sound. Barrie, they do okay in. There was that Main Street poll. People have mentioned another poll where the PCs were ahead, but I haven't seen that one. I don't know which one that's referencing.
I think it was an internal poll because I've went through the internet. I didn't see it.
Okay.
But then again, I mean, the fact that there's no Liberal candidate really helps the Greens. But still, the Liberals were not a factor in this riding. I see the numbers. They had 9% in the last election. So you would hope that all those 9% would all go to the Greens and not stay home because they're pouting because they don't have the Liberal candidate.
And they still need more. Yeah.
And they still need more. They still need to win over some NDP votes. NDP had 22% last election. So again, that Muskoka, the Conservatives had 48%. So you really need to pull everybody in there who's not a Conservative on your fold. I'm wondering whether some moderate Conservatives could be, Doug Ford is going to win anyway. Perhaps just throw a bone to the Greens, and we could have a second Green MP, but MPP. I'm sorry, but I don't see that dynamic being played out. It's going to be close. It should be close. The polling says it should be close, but I don't know about you, but you still have to give the edge to the PCs in there, right?
I think so. I won't underestimate the Greens' ability to concentrate resources and win a single riding. They've shown that they've done that in a couple of provinces now, provincially and federally. But yeah, the Muskoka part of the riding has been PC since '95, and the Parry Sound portion has been PC since 1948. So this, like, for the Greens to win a second seat is big news. For the PCs to lose Parry Sound Muskoka would be a huge upset in an election where they're doing okay. It's not like they're going to lose a lot of seats. So I'd probably give the PCs the edge, but you know what? I don't know if I'd give it more than 55-45 chance. I'm not sure if you I know you do have a probability for the riding. I'm not going to.
Let me tell you what I have right now. Of course, it's very interesting to see scrolling. 58-42.
All right. Well, there you go. Right now.
There you
My
go.
back
Very
of the
close.
napkin was pretty close.
It's also the fact that it's a massive riding. It's really huge. Not many roads, and so if you want to have some foot soldiers in there for the Greens to convince people to get your vote out and to help you out, it takes a lot more resources than go through Guelph or go through University of Rosedale. You can't just walk around. It's a huge place, but
yeah,
a place I would love to visit. Many friends went there. The Georgian Bay. I've never been, and I want to go soon. I hear it's beautiful.
Yeah, no, I actually haven't been either. So there we go. We should take a trip.
There you go, man. After the election.
So for the rest of Northern Ontario, there's 12 other ridings up there. There's actually quite a few that are kind of interesting to me. There's Timmins, where the NDP has held it since 1990, but the mayor is running for the PCs, and the NDP numbers have been all over the place in Northern Ontario. For a while, it looked like the NDP was getting back its support, but again, the last round of Main Street polls, which is all we have for the last week or so, which is a little frustrating, has had the NDP tanking. Again, is it just a weird, they had one or two bad days of polling that came in, and it's taking a while to work it out, because the poll seems to be a weekly rolling poll. I know at the beginning it seemed like it was a 3-day one, but now I think it's a 7-day one. So
actually, I spoke to Kito Maggi, the CEO of Main Street, and he says it's mostly a 3-day rolling, except for the North, because they can't get enough respondents. It's really hard to reach people over there with their methods, and so they extended it to a 7-day, but the extended is just for the North.
Okay, well, there you go. So that's if you had like 2 bad days in the North, it'll take a week to run it out of the poll. So
absolutely.
If they are dropping, then that means Timmins, they could lose to the PCs. Thunder Bay, Atikokan, they could lose to the Liberals. The NDP does well in Northern Ontario, and they're kind of counting on it. If, again, like it goes back to what we said earlier, if they start losing seats in Toronto, if they lose seats in Northern Ontario, if Hamilton, Niagara, they can't count on, then it's hard to win that second spot. So it's almost about whether the polls are capturing something, or if that incumbent advantage for the NDP is going to save them on election night.
I have Mushkegowuk James Bay as a close race, but the NDP had one with such a large margin. They would need to really go in the tank to lose this one. But then again, we have to go with the numbers we have, not the numbers we wish we had. Right now, the NDP is doing poorly in Ontario. But again, those people are hard to reach. It's not necessarily posters' fault. It's hard to get there. I have the Liberals winning the second Thunder Bay Atikokan. It should be a close race, but there's a liberal history also in that area.
Yeah, and also Northern Ontario. I'd say by far the region where who's on the ballot is going to mean more than anywhere else, right? Thunder Bay Superior North, Michael Gravel had been the MPP since the 90s. He's not running again. So that does potentially open it up for the Liberals to lose it. But based on the numbers we're seeing, the Liberal numbers are up a bit in Northern Ontario, and the NDP ones seem to be down quite a bit. So it suggests that Thunder Bay would go over to the Liberals. But again, we're dealing with some small samples in Northern Ontario.
That's true. You have to be careful. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've gone across the province. We'll finish off with just sort of a stakes for each of the party. Sort of, what's a success, what's a failure for them. We'll start at the bottom with the Greens. If they don't win the second seat, is this a bad election for them?
Well, they're playing the long game. The fact that they could have a second seat would be, of course, it would be double what they have. But they remind me of Quebec Solidaire 10 years ago in Quebec. For those who don't know, Quebec Solidaire won 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 10 seats. And so when you play the long game, the Greens had, I think it was 4.5 or 4.6% of the vote. They should get above this. Some polls had them as high as 8%. So if they win only one seat but get to 8%, at least they have them something to build on. If they do get that second seat, the problem, of course, is next time around in Parry-Saint-Muskoka, you could have a Liberal candidate and you got to have a split that will favor the PC. So I'd be very careful to read too much into this second seat. I focus on getting almost close to double digits, I think would be more important. Of course, get more funding for next time around, because they're not going to win. I mean, they're not going to win. There's no green wave. They're not winning 10 seats. They win maybe 2, and they were hoping for a third in University of Rosedale, and you and I agree that it's not going to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that if they get the second seat, then it's a great election for them. If they come kind of close, and as you say, they get their vote up to 6-7%, then I think that they can say this is a decent election for them. Because if you go back to 2018, I think there was only 4 ridings where they got more than 10%.
That's right.
And they weren't really close in any of them. But if after this one, they can point to, we almost won Parry-Saint-Muskoka. We came really close second in, I don't know, Dufferin-Caledon or something like that. Then there's the building blocks for next time. But yeah, I think they'll be disappointed if they don't win the second, because we're seriously talking about it. But it's not a win or lose for them. I think they're going to come out pretty good. Out of the opposition parties, probably the one that might be the happiest. So let's go next. We'll go in the order of the last election. So the Liberals. To me, this one's the most challenging.
Yeah, go ahead.
One. Yeah. Because, they either end up with 12 seats, 15 seats, get official party status back. Del Duca doesn't win his riding if they only end up with a dozen seats, or they end up with 30 some seats. Del Duca maybe squeaks in and can be the official opposition leader. And then it's a good election. And it means that they're the favorites to win in 2026. But that's a big gap for them.
It is.
Personally, Del Duca needs to win, I think, because if he doesn't win, then I think it's really hard for him to stay on.
It's over. I mean, how many leaders lost their seat without losing the election, of course, and stayed on? Not very many. I mean, this is a sign that when you lose your own seat, a seat that you used to have. And for the Liberals also, they're almost non-existent when you get out southwestern Ontario, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge chunk of seats that you're not competitive in. So if you don't sweep Toronto and most of the 905, so yes, I mostly agree with you here. I think a good election for the Liberals would be to finish second in seat. However, if they're just behind the NDP in seats, but beat them in a popular vote, it's not that bad. There's still a plan for 4 years from now, when the PC, of course, the wear and tear of time will have an effect at some point on the PC vote. But if they win 13 seats, let's say, and are tied with the NDP in votes, that would be the bad scenario for them, I think. I would not be surprised if they overperform by a point or two and win a dozen more seats because of it.
Yeah, the Liberals do a little bit better among older people than they're a bit more uniform. So they seem to be less impacted by turnout effects, as the NDP will, and the PCs probably will get bonus. But yeah, for the Liberals, it feels like finishing second means they win in terms of their own sort of moral victory. But yeah, for Del Duca, I think he has to win the seat.
Yes.
What happens if they finish second, but he doesn't win a seat, which could easily happen? I don't know what happens then. Who's going to resign to give him a seat? It's not going to be a safe seat they can resign.
I would say he's a transition leader. I know it's very mean. If Mr. Duca listens to this, why would he? But if he does, I'm sorry. This is nothing personal, but it doesn't feel like a long-term leader for the Liberals. It means like a rebuild. I would also add that if you remember, my friend, in our December show, we had an over-under with the Liberals, and I said the Liberals were with official opposition, and you said they wouldn't. So I really want the Liberals just to finish second, so I can have one more point in this contest.
Yes, I know. I am going to review what happens after this one, but I feel Ontario. I remember we did bad. Well, no, I did badly with Jason Kenney. I said he'd get over 77%. Things changed a lot since.
They changed a lot in the winter. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. NDP official opposition status, according to the party, 10 seats away from government. What do you think?
And a surge also in the poll in their internal polls last week. Sure.
No, yeah, they're at 30% allegedly. Okay. Yeah, for the NDP, I don't feel like there's a good outcome here for them because they're going to lose seats. They might retain official opposition status, but if they retain official opposition status with 25 seats or something like that, they're back to their 23% of the vote that they traditionally get in a half-decent election. I have a hard time seeing a result that makes the party happy with what happened.
Well, the only result that would make them happy would mean that the polls are all wrong. They would have to be close to 30%. If they win 27, 28, 29% of the vote and win 30 seats, Andrea Horwath could turn to her caucus and say, look, we did our best. We saved the furniture, as we say in French.
The expectations are so low, right? That maybe they can beat the expectations. Yeah,
but that's not what the polls are saying. I mean, the polls would have to be wrong because we've seen some polls as low as 21 or 22%, which is below their cruising altitude in the regular elections. So, again, if I were them, I saw Ms. Horwath was in Essex just the day before yesterday, and I was like, okay, but you really should be in Hamilton and Kitchener and Niagara. I mean, you're probably going to lose Essex. You should play defense in more of your, traditional seats, I think. But, perhaps I'm missing the numbers that they have, but their numbers that they linked to the Stars said that they were surging, and clearly they're not. So perhaps they have bad data.
Or maybe they weren't being completely honest.
Eric, you're so cynical. But yeah, the NDP, the worst case scenario, of course, is they finish third. Even if Ms. Horwath wins her riding, which she should, Hamilton Center, she will have to be removed by her caucus unless she does it herself. So official, as you said, official opposition, but with 25 or 26 seats, I don't think it's good enough. But the NDP, sometimes they don't have this killer instinct, especially at the federal level. I mean, Tom Mulcair didn't have a second chance, but they're about to give a third chance to Jagmeet Singh. So if the expectations are low enough, you could be happy. That's the equation of happiness: expectations minus reality.
Well, maybe they should teach us something all, just to be happier with their own lot in life. But Andrea Horwath, she, this is her fourth campaign. And even if she did pretty good, like let's say she got 38 seats, they more or less way beat their expectations, still official opposition status. She's been leader for 13 years. I can't imagine that she'd even want to stick around for another 4 years and, hope to be premier after 17 years as NDP leader, meaning that you have to be in the job for another 8 years, if you have like hopes. So anyway, so it does seem like this is probably her last campaign. But yeah, I think that the NDP, for them, I think it's beat expectations. That's the best outcome for them, but it's hard to imagine much worse. Okay, the PCs, they seem to be the ones who having the best election. No one's bothering them too much, including the media. Doug Ford's avoiding them as much as he can. They have less support than last time, though I won't be surprised if they beat their polls and end up 48% again. I mean, for them, as long as they get 65, they're good, right? Like, because 63, you get 63, 64, too close to, someone gets a cold and you lose your majority. But for them, it feels like they can only have a good outcome. If
in the simplest of terms, Eric, If you compare the numbers right now with 2018, the PCs have lost maybe 2 or 3 points to the right-wing parties, the new parties, and the NDP and the OLP are sharing the rest, right? And maybe a point or two more for the Greens. The PCs, I mean, I think they will end up roughly where they were in 2018. It's just that the vote split, as we said, if the Liberals underperform by a point or two, and the NDPs underperform by a point or two, right now my model shows that if the PC get to 40%, which is not that far from where they are, they're around 38. If they get 40%, we're talking super majority. We're talking 85 to 90 seats. And so it's possible that they get more seats, perhaps double-digit more seats with fewer votes. I guess this is going to frustrate a lot of people who are in favor of electoral reform, because it would be an F the first past the post moment. It's not impossible. My model has the high 70s, low 80s in seats. I would not be surprised if they win 85 to 90, if they overperform their polls.
Yeah, I have to agree with you when you say it that way. If to me, 90 would be less surprising than 60. So, exactly. Because you look at even just the turnout advantages, they do so well among older voters, and with the low turnout election, when there's low turnout, it's usually younger people that drop more, right?
Exactly.
Older voters still largely go out, you can still count as 65, 70% of them. So you expect the PCs to beat their polls. So it doesn't mean that will happen. It doesn't always happen that way, but it is a lot easier to imagine that. So, so what would be a bad outcome then? What do you think is one where the PCs get scared?
Let's say they're in the mid 60s and the Liberals get to 30, 35 seats. Then you know that in 2026, it's going to be a red-blue race. I don't think the PCs are afraid of the NDP at all, because the NDP has a low ceiling in seats. And so in the best scenario for the PCs long-term would be, again, the Liberals are in the teens and they're still searching for their soul. But if the Liberals are a strong opposition, it sets the table for 2026. And I know we're getting far ahead of ourselves, but the PCs, unless the polls are really, really wrong, the PCs will win. Then Doug Ford gets another 4 years. And then after that, perhaps, what does that mean? That means that Pierre Poilievre loses to Trudeau, and then Doug Ford goes to the federal Conservatives. No, I'm kidding. But
well, we'll keep it. We'll see how his French improves. He
promised François Legault, and they cheered on a beer that he would improve his French. It's hard to do that when you're working full time, but we'll see if it's true.
Yeah, we'll see. How about just briefly, any chance for a minority? I think I generally had it at 15% or 20% chance. The latest numbers, it's down to about 10%.
I have 12%, so same range.
Yeah.
And by the way, for those asking, it's not the NDP that can create a minority for the PC. The NDP would have to win its Hamilton, Niagara, Windsor, of course, seats. But it's if the Ford, the PC drop a few points in NN05 and the Liberals do better than expected. That's how you get to a minority. There is no path in which the Liberals still remain in their collapse state and the PC go to a minority. If there's a minority, one chance out of 8, it's not impossible. But if it happens, let's say 61 seat or something. Then drama. You and I would have to do another podcast just to talk about the what ifs, because it would be very interesting. It's going to be a game of chicken. Who's going to blink first? Because neither the NDP or the Liberals really want to get into a coalition. They don't want to. But if they're for to win 60 seats, they will have to. They will have to. Otherwise, they'll be crucified by their own voters.
Or they'll have to swallow their own hat. But like, this campaign makes it feel like they're less willing to do that. They seem to hate each other more than they did 4 weeks ago. So I mean, that's
just before we came on, a reader asked me on Twitter if there's a chance of a Parti Québécois and Québec Solidaire coalition. And
in Ontario, probably not.
No, probably not. But in Quebec, I said it's very similar actually to the Liberals and NDP, because they have similarities between them. But there's so much animosity that I just don't see it happening. Who's going to blink first and tend a hand and say, how about we do a coalition? It's unfortunate, but the way the system is, the Liberals don't want to share power with the NDP. They just don't.
Yeah. And even, we think about what happened federally. There seemed to be at least a little bit more personal regard between Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh than we see lately between Andrew Horwath, Stephen Del Duca. Stephen Del Duca recently accusing the NDP of being misogynist for what they did to their female candidates. So, that's not going to be easy to mend after the election. So anyway, all right. So we're both predicting big changes on election night, some sort of surprise. It'll be a long night. It's going to be a short night, I think. Ontario has the new way of counting votes. They did it in the last time. I think CBC was able to project the outcome in about 15 minutes.
Wow.
But you know what? There'll be lots to delve into in terms of the results. So it's not just about the call. It's about what happened in every riding. And I think there'll still be a lot of interesting storylines to watch on election night.
When does the vote counting start? 8 o'clock?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. So 9:15-ish, we should know. Okay.
Yeah. But stick around to find out what's going to happen to the leaders. The Greens win a seat. There's always something. It's not just about not about just who wins. All right. Well, Philippe, I really appreciate this. And if we prove to be wrong, I'll have you on next week, and we'll both apologize. But apart from that, it wasn't the best campaign, but you know what? This podcast was the best part of it. So thanks for coming on.
Merci beaucoup, Eric. I really appreciate that. And don't forget, everyone, there's a Quebec election. I challenge Eric to do both an English and a French podcast about the Quebec election. I hope you will accept my challenge because it will be a lot of fun.
On verra. Okay, thanks for that.
Take care. Bye-bye.